This is the NFL on NBC for Week 8 with host Greg Gumbel and co-host Ahmad Rashad.
Venerable Soldier Field in Chicago is the site as the 4-2 Chicago Bears host the Houston Oilers. Quarterback Erik Kramer having a terrific season for the Bears. 14 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions for the second highest scoring team in the NFC. Another of our early games is at Giant Stadium, where the Dolphins, looking to bounce back from 2 straight losses, face the miserable New York Jets. Once again, Bernie Kosar gets the start for the Dolphins. Last week he did fine, but it was the defense that betrayed Miami. In our big doubleheader game, the resurgent Denver Broncos face the team with the best record in the AFC, the Kansas City Chiefs. Hi, everyone. Greg Gumbel along with the entire cast of characters. Joe Montana, Joe Gibbs, Mike Ditka, the same Mike Ditka who taught Jim Harbaugh everything he knows about quarterbacking.
And he's trying to forget it all. If he does forget it all, they're going to win again today.
Did you ever remember anything that a coach ever taught you?
No, you just don't listen to him.
Listen and listen well, coaches. We begin with Mike Ditka and Jim Harbaugh's former team, the Chicago Bears, who host Houston today. The Bears are in the thick of the NFC Central race, tied with the Packers, 1/2 game behind the Bucs. Bob Trumpy has a report. Bob.
Greg, thank you. A couple of new faces on the offense for the Chicago Bears. First of all, the 1995 Heisman Trophy winner out of Colorado, Rashaan Salaam, missed a couple of weeks at camp, so he came in and had a slow start. But if you talk to the Bears coaches, this young man is going to be their future. He's turned the ball over, put the ball on the ground a little bit. Walter Payton, his confidant here in Chicago, has told him, forget the fumbles, you'll be fine. The other big name is Erik Kramer. You mentioned his performance in '95, 14 touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. He is a young man who sees the field very well. He spreads the ball around. And maybe most importantly, Greg, Erik Kramer can get the ball down the field to people like Curtis Conway. So this offense for Chicago now is a little more vertical, a little quicker to the end zone.
All right, Trump, thank you. Erik Kramer is the number 3 rated quarterback overall in the National Football League. Joe, number 2 in the NFC. What's the difference between the Erik Kramer this year and the one last year?
Well, number one, he hasn't lost his job yet, and he's still on the field. But the biggest thing is that I think he's playing with a lot more patience and a lot more poise. He's letting this offense work for himself. And he's not trying to make the big plays. He's got some great tools to work with Salaam and Conrad, and he's letting them do the work and taking advantage of them.
All right, Mike, you talked with Dave Wyman this week. What's going on with these Bears?
Well, it is. It's probably the most explosive offense the Bears have had in a long time, but I think Dave's big concern is defense. They're not consistent on defense. They haven't stopped the run well. They haven't defended the pass well. The other thing is kicking. The kicking game is not real good, and Todd Sauerbrunn is a big problem. He's not punting the ball well, and he's not kicking off that well, and that's a big concern to that team.
All right, Mike, let's move to the Dolphins and the Jets, who meet today at the New Jersey Meadowlands. After starting 4-0, Miami has dropped its last 2 games. For the Jets, last week's loss to Carolina left them with the worst record in football at 1-6. Cris Collinsworth has more from Giant Stadium. Chris.
Greg, what appears to be an easy game for the Dolphins on paper certainly made more difficult because of some key injuries to the Miami Dolphins. Not only Dan Marino out of this one because of the injuries, Bernie Kosar gets a start. Also, Eric Green will be out, as will Trace Armstrong because of a knee injury. But good news for Miami Dolphin fans, Dan Marino, before the ball game, able to move around a little bit, doing his best to ollie shuffle, and he told me just moments ago that he would definitely be playing next week against the Buffalo Bills. As for the Jets, Bubby Brister makes his 2nd consecutive start, but don't be surprised if Glenn Foley works his way into this ball game before it's over as the rebuilding job continues for the Jets. Greg?
All right, Chris, thanks very much. One of our late games today, Indianapolis at Oakland. Jeff Hostetler will not play for the Raiders today. He took an elbow and a forearm to the throat last Monday night from Broncos linebacker Dave Wyman. There was no conclusive video of the incident since it occurred away from the ball. We have obtained this footage from the Raiders. Here is the end of the play when Wyman went after Hostetler. Wyman was ejected from the game and then fined $4,000. The Raiders felt that was much too light. They are pushing for a much heavier fine and/or suspension. The league is going to look into it, and the Raiders have sent Gene Washington of the league office a copy of the that we just showed you. Joe, a quarterback's in a vulnerable situation when the play turns around and it comes back the other way.
Well, the first things you learn as a quarterback early in your career is when something like this happens, a fumble, an interception, start looking around because people hunt up the quarterback because he's usually the last means of defense there. But here you can see he's way away from the play. The play's about to end. And this is absurd for someone to go in and take a cheap shot like this. He deserves more than $4,000.
Okay, Joe, this is not a typical play. This is a renegade play out of the blue.
I think it is, and I have never been around a coach in the NFL that taught a cheap shot like that. I don't think good teams are cheap shot artists, and I don't think good players are cheap shot artists. That's my experience.
All right, Mike, Joe just said that fine isn't enough. Would you do more?
Well, I agree with him. I think the fine is not enough. I think what you ought to do is suspend the guy for a game or two, and I think then he'll understand, because then you're fined a game salary. I think that's a lot more. But this is way out of hand. This is a bad thing. And then he taunted the guy once he knocked him down.
All right, gentlemen, for big doings at 4 o'clock kickoffs as well. For that, let's go over to Ahmad.
You know, Greg, you called the Jets miserable, and I just thought about that. Not only is that cold, but it's also true. Kansas City, on the other hand, and Denver on a roll. The Chiefs are 6-1, best in the AFC. Denver has won its last 2 games by a combined score of 64-3. The Broncos still trail the Chiefs in a very competitive AFC West by 2 games. Phil Simms has a report from Mile High Stadium.
Thanks, Ahmad. Yesterday out here in Denver, it was 75 and sunny. Well, today, right now, it's 36 degrees. And 1 hour west, look what's coming. Snow, and lots of it. 6 to 12 inches of snow forecast should be coming in here around game time. Look at the clouds rolling in all over now over the stadium. Wind gust up to 30 miles per hour. I think the players can deal with the snow today, but what's going to be a problem is those wind gusts for the quarterbacks and receivers. Saying that, I think the advantage goes to John Elway because of his arm strength. Elway, we can expect to see him again in that no huddle, shotgun formation, great success the last couple of weeks. 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. On the other hand, the Kansas City Chiefs, only 1 victory in their last 12 times here at Mile High Stadium. Then they were led by Joe Montana, who's sitting in that studio today. They know if a victory here today, they have a good shot at winning this AFC West title with victories over the Raiders and the Denver Broncos. Now let's throw it back to that warm, cozy studio, and Ahmad Rashad.
All right, thanks, Phil. Kansas City at 6-1, not only playing well, but very confident.
It's definitely a different team. The confidence is stemming from one person, and that's Steve Bono. Everyone knew at this point that he could come in and play as a backup, but he's answered the questions about being a starter, playing in some critical situations, and coming down and winning some games at the end.
All right, Joe, how about Denver? Early in the season, a lot of people thought they were out of it. All of a sudden, they find themselves in a situation where they can get right back in it.
They can get back in, Ahmad, but as you know, I love picking teams that are in desperate situations. Hey, they cannot afford to be set in 4-4, lose this game, and have Kansas City at 7-1. It's a desperate situation. I wouldn't pick against them today.
Now, everybody talks about John Elway and what he's done with that shotgun offense, but what about the defense?
Well, they've only given up 3 points in the last 2 weeks. You should win those 2 football games. And I don't think it's so much a difference in personnel. I think they're just playing a better scheme on defense, and the people know where they're supposed to be, and they're getting there.
The season really starts about now, doesn't it? It gets good. By the way, we have got the entire AFC West playing in our 4 o'clock games, football's best division. The Raiders, with Vince Evans replacing Jeff Hostetler, host the red-hot Colts and Jim Harbaugh. And some of you will see San Diego visiting the Kingdom to take on the Seahawks. And speaking of Seattle, it's been a long time since anyone heard from the Buzz.
What's up with this guy right here? This is a mother's worst nightmare.
Up next, former Seattle Seahawk Brian Bosworth checks in. We'll bring you his visit with Jim Gray when the NFL on NBC continues.
When it comes to mutual funds, it's often hard to tell what you're looking at. Is this one better? Or this one? Schwab makes finding funds that may be right for you easy with the Select List. Each quarter, we analyze the more than 350 no-load funds we provide, based on data from Morningstar, to give you a summary of the historically high performers. For a free trial subscription, call 1-800-5-NO-LOAD and see if it doesn't help bring things into focus.
You think in color. Your computer thinks in color. So how come everything you print comes out black and white? Black and white. The Epson Stylus color printers, starting at $349 for the kind of brilliant color that will let your ideas be heard. You've got to see it in Epson color.
Introducing Membership Rewards from American Express, a rewards program that makes every dollar you spend add up to a world of choices just by using the card. For a gift, something you need. The possibilities seem endless, and all of them are free. With the Membership Rewards program, you decide where to use your rewards and what works best for you. So enroll today in membership rewards. Call 1-800-AXP-EARN.
We're all in search of answers. See us for the ones about cars.
Laboratory tests show the Stanley Sharpshooter staple gun requires a mere 19 pounds of force to drive a staple flush. Our competitor's model requires just a bit more. The Sharpshooter, only from Stanley.
The NFL on NBC is brought to you by Charles Schwab and Company, helping investors help themselves. By Subway, now that's a sandwich. And by American Express.
Back in the late 1980s, Brian Bosworth was a famous football player. He signed a 10-year, $11 million contract with the Seattle Seahawks. But his career as a linebacker was cut short by a shoulder injury. Just 24 games played in 3 seasons. Now he's an actor, currently shooting a movie 4 hours north of Toronto, and that is where Jim Gray spoke to him.
When you look at yourself now, are you Brian Bosworth or are you still the Boz?
Well, I think I'm still both, you know, because I still, the Boz, I look at the Boz and then, I never took the Boz seriously when I played the guy. And he was, now that I look at it, he's like the first character that I ever played, you know. And when I first started playing him, I didn't take him seriously, and I had a lot of fun with him. And now that I look back on him, I laugh at some of the things he did, because I just can't imagine. My grandfather used to say, you know, don't let your mouth overload your ass. And that's what the Boz was all about. He was always constantly overloading his mouth. And it was fun. You know, I really enjoyed being that character.
What were some of the most outrageous things that you did as the Boz?
Ridiculous haircut that I had. So I look back when I go home and I see the pictures and I just laugh at this, you know, big meathead with this haircut and stripes, and I just shake my head at the phenomena that was happening at the time, because all the other kids were doing the same thing, you know, and I just, you know, I wanted to apologize to all the parents for causing their headaches for the haircut.
Do you feel as though you would have been a great professional football player, or was there more style really than substance?
No, I always thought that I was a classic overachiever. I didn't really have the body frame, you know, that a classic middle linebacker would have. I was fast as lightning. I still am. I think that's what really set me apart from most linebackers at the time. But I think my heart would have allowed me to finally achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve.
You said you didn't have the body, so you kind of created it. And that gets into the whole steroid issue and your use of steroids.
Sure.
When you look back upon that, what are your thoughts now? Big mistake?
Well, you know, it's funny. Back then, you know, steroids weren't as taboo as they are today. They weren't, you know, frowned upon. And, you know, it was 20 years old, 21 years old, and there's some things that I did when I was 20 and 21 years old that I wish I had not done. But if I hadn't done them, then I couldn't talk to young kids today about, you know, the ramifications of actually experimenting with these drugs and doing things that may cause you problems down the road.
People who might be watching this, you don't look like the Boz or the Brian Bosworth that we all know. Your hair has grown.
Yeah.
You're much smaller, noticeably smaller than you once were.
Yeah.
Do people still come up and recognize you on the street?
Oh, yeah, they do. I laugh at this. I mean, he's a fun guy, and I like the image that this guy had. And people still recognize and they identify with this guy here. This guy really took life. He set boundaries for himself, and I think he loved to jump over the line all the time just to see what it's like on the other side of the fence.
Mike, here was a guy, when he came out of college, he was one of the best self-promoters that I've ever seen. As a matter of fact, he billed himself as the next Dick Butkus.
Give me a break. Next Dick Butkus. He's about as close to Butkus as Snow White was. Now, this guy had some little 8.5 shoes, some little tiny hands, and he took funny steps when he ran. If he couldn't run fast, he couldn't have played this game.
And obviously, he would not have been able to play for you.
Not at all.
All right. Coming up, we'll talk about the state of officiating in the NFL.
Penalty gets the offense. We were sitting the ball, and it took more time than it should have.
What does that mean?